With all the talk at the moment about One D&D coming in, what's actually going to happen if you ignore it and just keep playing 5th Ed? G'day team, I'm Luke from Big Game Small Pieces, and I want to talk to you about changing D&D editions. So first of all, we need to discuss what is an edition before we can talk about changing editions. And for me, it would be a substantial change in which the way the rules work. To sum it up quickly, in second edition came out, it had THACO rules and a number of ways for its level and class-based monsters to make saves with percentages. That all happened in 1989 when it came out. Then in 2000, third edition came out with a D20 system more or less as we know it. And it was a precise system of exactly how to get bonuses and how to get benefits out of things. Then 4th Ed came out, and it was all about, instead of encounters based over 24 hours, it was more based on encounter-based activities. That came out in 2008. And 5th Ed came out in 2014, and it was just made to be a simplified system. So what happens with 0.5, like as example, 3.5? Well, this came out more as a polish to the rules. The main rules are going to stay roughly as they are. We're just going to make some tests and adjustments because things either don't work, need to be adjusted, or power balance and things like that need to be adjusted. And so we don't need a whole new rule set. We just need to make some slight changes. This is why, highly likely, I'm going to keep referring to One D&D as 5.5, because, as they say, they're going to make the thing backwards compatible, and it really feels like they're not changing any major rules. They're just testing, adjusting exactly how spells are got, what saves you make, and how these things are going to work. So giving everyone extra feet at level 1 doesn't change the way the game plays. Why do we need a new edition? Many of you are probably asking, the game seems fine, why do we need another edition? And this is because potentially there is lots of errata, lots of clarification online as to where the preciseness of some of these rules and calls are made, and they're spread out over tweets and out of posts and PDF documents and so forth. There's also a number of spells, abilities and such that the wording isn't quite right and people are taking it for granted. There's also potentially a lot of things that are underpowered and need to be brought up so that everyone enjoys playing all the different systems. Monk! Low-level monk. And the biggest one that we're probably talking about would be they've got to sell books. They're a company. They're going to release this every couple of years. They've got to sell some books. So for reference, what happened with 3 and 3.5 before we go into 5 and 5.5? Basically, there were a few things that needed to be checked and brought back into the list. Some things didn't quite work the way they wanted to, and they noticed with the system growing at its exponential rate, there was a lot of ways that people could take advantage of things and really munchkinize their characters. Bards' skill points had to change, and some of the spells on their list were changed. Clerics were spontaneously allowed to cast Cure and inflict spells. Druid animal companions had to make it so they could level up, so you didn't have to keep swapping out your animal companion every couple of levels. Paladins' mounts, sorcerers had to get a revision to some of theirs when their leveling up system. Wizards' spell changes, skills had to be reduced and more finalized into less because there was a heap of them. Some feats had to be adjusted and changed, spells had to be reworded and listed, and some things had to be also removed or completely changed. Command plants became control plants and so forth. There was a lot of little things that just kept happening and needed tweaks. The damage reduction was one of the biggest things that changed. Instead of using numbers, you took a +1, without a +1 weapon, you took 10 points off before they took any damage. They changed that to you needed a silver weapon, you needed an adamantine, you needed a cold iron and so forth to give it the damage reduction. So that was a lot of changes that had to happen in the 3 to 3.5. But for the most part of it, 3.5, I simply ignored. And I just kept playing 3rd edition. As was, and occasionally someone would tell me they're playing a 3.5 monk, and I just knew the little changes, such as damage reduction, that I'd have to keep into account to make sure they weren't disadvantaged. So why didn't I change over immediately from 3 to 3.5? Well, one was we already had the books and we knew the rules, so changing didn't make sense. I dare say, I can't remember specifically, but we're also probably in the middle of a campaign, and changing everything might have thrown things out. We'd also paid for a lot of the books and weren't about to go and buy brand new books that I look over at my shelf on, because I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And at that point, us as players also knew the game's strengths and weaknesses. And we knew that a bard kind of had to be given a magical item low on, because their DCs for their spell resist saves against the magical items weren't high. So you just you learnt how to adjust, and you knew who had to get what to make things work. But for all its faults, it worked fine. There was still plenty of material out there, game systems that we were playing that was still 3rd edition, and it was only the few people who every now and again said, hey, like, I'm going to play a 3.5 monk or bard or such because they work better. And we were all just like, yeah, that's fine. We've still got our books, so we'll just keep running out of ours and we'll just blend yours into the campaign. Now, when I changed editions from 3 to 5th edition, because I skipped 4th edition, some reasons to why that happened. One was I moved location, and my regular players, who we'd been playing in isolation effectively with, I no longer had access to them. And so trying to find 3rd or 3.5 edition players in a new location was difficult, because we kept ourselves in isolation. We didn't see what the rest of the community was doing, and they switched over to 5th edition. I also joined an area that had Adventures League and couldn't just rock up and say, well, I want to play 3rd edition, not 5th edition. So I had to march to the beat of their drum. Also, some of the things that made us convert over were the community had shifted, as I'd said, with a lot of things to the new system, and people didn't know 3rd Ed, so we would have to teach new people our game system, because they just didn't know it and didn't understand it. Another one was 3 or 3.5. I'll just say 1 instead of combining. I didn't have any apps to help it. Everything was over on the 5th edition apps, so it was a lot easier for people to make characters. And making a character in 3rd edition wasn't easy, but it was fun. So we had to change some things over. Once again, the new people coming and joining our game didn't know the rules. The new stuff that 5th Ed was interesting and a new way of looking at it. And I can tell you, one of the last games I ran was a level 18 to 20 adventure, The Bastion of Broken Souls. And playing it in 3rd Ed, with its complex character systems of bad guys, you'd have half-page to page-big bad guys, and you'll be trying to read and remember it, and you think it's hard to remember an ability on your player sheet that you've been playing for 20 levels. Try a monster you've just been handed, like, oh geez, how do I make this guy effective when he's got so many abilities? Like, which one do I use? How do I stack them? How do I do this? It's complex. 5th edition is simple. Therefore, it's a lot easier to run these things, good or bad. So what's my forecast for One D&D before we start talking about not converting? Well, to know what we're going to convert to, I believe One D&D is basically going to be 5th Ed with a lot of homebrew and house rules. Some of these you probably already do, or know of these rules in general. We'll be looking at new rules for situations that don't have rules for them, such as falling downstairs, or how much damage does it actually take, or maybe it's a change to opportunity attacks to make people move on the battlefield a little more. That might make the game a bit more interesting. Some tables will use these new rules, and others will pick from them instead of the ones they like that work for their table, especially coming from 5th Ed. The plan at the moment is that they're backwards compatible, so they can't be that odd that the things that you're doing currently don't automatically blend into it, with some slight adjustments. And this will allow for a creeping of the system to come across. There will be, once again, in your game of playing 5th Ed, some such, you'll be in the middle of Curse of Strahd when this comes out. One of the players will die, and they'll want to start a new player, but use the One D&D system. You'll have to have a look at it, correct for any power balancing systems, such as you can't have that feat at level 1, but because the rest of the players don't have it. Or maybe you just give all the other players an extra feat, and then they can play their character as is, and you just keep massaging it as you go. So there shouldn't be a big change there. And it's highly likely they're going to have stronger PCs. How do you make players buy new books? You present them something better and they'll go across and they'll buy it. So stronger PCs are highly likely going to be a thing. And this is not just a case of deliberately trying to make them stronger. This is probably also a review of some of the spells and fixing them up so that they work better or as originally intended. Because they're finding now after 10 years of gameplay, it's not quite exactly what they intended it to be. So what is it going to be like sticking to 5th Ed instead of going to One D&D? Well, I think it's going to be very much like when I stuck with 3rd Ed instead of going to 3.5. We're going to a system that's similar to the last. It's backwards compatible, so there shouldn't be major problems. There's just going to be a lot of tweaks. So what I see is generally using your books, using all the things you own, you've got heaps of material. And there's going to be heaps of material out there for you to keep using. So you don't have to. You can definitely stay with it. There will be a few little things. You'll notice some other rules from One D&D that you like, and you bring across as house rules in your system because they improve the game and make it better. And you've probably also got your own house rules and things that you and your players enjoy that you probably do anyway. Occasionally, there's going to be some players who play at multiple tables, multiple groups, and they're going to come across and say, hey, in One D&D, we do this, isn't it great? We should be doing this at our table. This rule fixes, or this way of gameplay fixes a lot of things. And hopefully, with an open mind, you'll look at it and go, yeah, that is better, and the balance is still there. Let's bring that into our table. But as years go on, your group is going to find themselves isolated. And if you're just sticking with those players, and then that's it until you run out of players, and then you're just going to finish, that could be fine. But working in isolation, you aren't going to be as open potentially as other groups are for people to come join the play. New players who come in and say, I only know 6th Ed, I don't know 5th Ed. And so they're going to come in and want to join your table. And that barrier is going to be something to overcome. As people try and learn and go, oh, you don't play rules like this, which will make it harder for some people to plan their characters because it won't do what they thought it was going to do now with the rule changes. Not knowing what they're going to be, of course. It's still early days. And it's not going to happen overnight. People are still going to be running, just because One D&D drops, people are still in the middle of their Rime and the Frostmaiden campaign. They're still in the middle of their, let's have a look, Baldur's Gate Descent and Avernus campaign. They're still in the middle of their Curse of Strahd campaigns. They're not just going to stop them. Hopefully they don't just stop them. They continue running those game systems with the intent to switch later when people are ready for it or when the campaign ends and they start their new one. But what you're going to notice is a lot of the digital platforms are going to be written for One D&D. This is to encourage you to spend the money, buy the books, support the new system. So there will still be third-party 5e apps and things out there, but as time goes on and more people convert across, there's going to be a lot less apps and things that support your 5th Ed experience. And so eventually you will find yourself, like me, strong-armed into converting across, and it wasn't that bad. In some cases, it was better. I love prestige classes. Now every subclass makes everyone take on a prestige class. It makes every druid feel different from the last druid because they're now playing a different subclass. So there are some great things about changing editions that you'll find out there. And as I said, you can just stick with what you're doing, but slowly, over time, you're going to find more and more the support, the player knowledge, and the player desires are going to change. And eventually, you're going to find yourself playing One D&D, if not house table modified to be what you like. So what do we do? Well, the important thing is that we give feedback to wizards. They're asking for it. They're asking us to play test their stuff. And I don't start games every week, so I can't just make new characters and keep doing this. So I'm not always in a situation to play test, but maybe you're starting a campaign and you are. And you're going to run this and give all your players that feat at level 1 and give them some of these options to start growing their game. Give it a go. Give the feedback. If you're going to be resilient to fighting One D&D, then potentially jump on and give the feedback so that they know what people want changed. If you're happy to stick with 5th Ed, well, that might be enough, and they might just go, well, we'll just leave those people. They're happy with what they've got. They've paid for their money, and they're going to potentially keep buying other people's secondhand copies of books. But for those of you who are new onto the new system, there's going to be digital support platforms. There's going to be all this sort of stuff. And people, as I've said, are eventually going to change over to the new system. At least the majority of us will. So that means they need your feedback. They need you to tell them what is going to be good, what you like and what you don't like, and what you would support, and what you would house rule out anyway, even if it was one of the main rules. They want to know this sort of stuff. So keep an eye out for the feedback. Have a look at the playtest material they publish. And let's see if we can make this next version of D&D something that's even better than what we have now. Do we have to buy all our books immediately? No, we can hold off. We can take our time. We can slowly come across. But the thing we slowly and eventually come across to, we want it to be right for us and to be the best experience. And that won't happen if we don't speak up and say what we do and don't like. So anyway, I'm Luke from Big Game Small Pieces, and I'm simply saying enjoy D&D. Don't panic. Very few things are going to change overnight. I'll catch you next time.